For some stupid reason, I have decided to cut back on coffee. This is a terrible, terrible experiment on me. I've tried it before, and it wasn't pretty then for me or for anyone around me. Usually in my life, all good things happen with coffee involved, and I've done so much work in my life, written so many papers, and did all kinds of studying in good coffee shops. So I don't know what I'm going to do. But Monday, there was no coffee that morning, so I had a rough day on the slopes. I had a headache. I was surly. I was half asleep all day. It didn't really do all that well. But Tuesday, I was down in Boulder, chugging through some emails, getting some schedule stuff done, planning ahead for different parts of the church. So efficient. Before there was this meeting that was less than efficient. But I'm sitting there with my cup, and the Holy Spirit's working right through my computer because I'm in this great coffee shop. Oh, it was nice. It was nice to remember what that's like because I've been a few days without. Across the room, I wasn't the only one getting work done. You could hear him once in a while if you wanted to be a snoop, which is really valuable when you're brainstorming for a sermon. Just listen to a coffee shop and snoop around. There was a man a little bit past middle age. There was a woman about 30, and it seemed like they were planning some kind of environmental justice event, which should be easy in Boulder. All you got to do, if you build it with recycled materials, they will come on their bikes and their hybrids. But these two people, they wanted to reach past the Patagonia Disneyland kind of people. They wanted to draw in kids who might have to learn about this stuff. They wanted to draw in people who didn't know quite what they could do environmentally for the green movement. They wanted to plan an event that got past the political divisions that haunt this sort of issue. And so here they were, in a coffee shop, being inspired, considering ways that they could use art to build awareness. This awesome, non-confrontational, just boundary-breaking way so that everyone at the event could do something to make a project together. Seated much closer, 2 tables over from me. I couldn't help but hear it, even if I want to. There were 2 women, one of them very loud. I think they worked for CU, or maybe they had a project that CU had hired them for. They were talking about how to teach RA. An RA is a resident advisor. They help anyone who lives in the dorms. How many people lived in a college dorm? How many people couldn't stand your RA? Cinda's still there. No, my RA was pretty good most of the time. They were going to try to help these RAs in a dorm full of diverse young people seeking their own identity in a new community. How can they help the RAs make the dorms more welcoming? How can they help the RAs to help new students understand, especially their issue was complicated sexual identities? Not just gay and lesbian, but trans and all these kind of things, polyamorous, whatever it might be. So they were discussing, one, very loudly, when you're dealing with folks like this, whatever some students in the dorm might believe about the issue, how can we cultivate tolerance and how can we cultivate acceptance and respect? What language is most sensitive? What assumptions are most offensive? How can we take this marginalized group, so easily and often persecuted, and whatever other students might think about them, how can we care about them? That was that conversation. And meanwhile, through this, in the coffee shop, in walks a homeless guy. And not the homeless guy like Uncle Carl's down on his luck. No, this is an all-star, serious homeless guy. A little bit dirty. He slept outside the night before, very clearly, creaking more than you should. He just probably woken up and he had a toll on his body. He was wearing some slightly ratty clothes. His face was dark and weathered, but his hands were white with all the cracks and the scars of the cold. He was really tall, so kind of intimidating, missing a bunch of teeth. And usually when a guy like that walks into a classy coffee shop, the barista shoos them on. Maybe lets them warm up for a moment, but usually the barista shoos them on because you don't want a guy like that mingling with people like this. But not this time. This time the barista welcomed him in the door, walked him to the back, sat him in front of a warm fire on a soft chair, and said, "Take some time to warm up." He did not belong amidst all the grad students and the professionals who were getting all their work done on their computers, but there he was, having some time. And in less than 1 minute, almost immediately, there was a little guy with a beret on, short little pudgy guy with a beret. He must have been Canadian or something. And he walked over and he offered the homeless guy a cup of coffee. He brought him back a scone. Didn't know him. Never met him. He was just being hospitable. More than hospitable. It was a grace to someone who didn't expect grace. It was a grace for me to see someone go above and beyond the sort of simple kindness that just greases the social wheel. Now, I don't know if Ruth, especially the second chapter, I don't know if it's supposed to be a story about overcoming cultural divisions, especially on contentious issues like immigration and race. Maybe that's part of it. I don't know if it's supposed to be about bringing some normalcy and safety to people who are usually marginalized, like in that society, women and the poor. In our society, women and the poor. Maybe it's about that, perhaps. I don't know if it's supposed to be about welcoming any outsiders with more grace than is expected. Probably has something to do with that. There is a tension throughout the Old Testament, all through all these different books. It runs through our hearts in some degree or other. The tension is, on one hand, Hebrew people loved the category, the value of purity. That was so important to being a Hebrew, was purity. You had Levitical rules about what belongs where and what you should wear on your body and what you should eat and how to keep things clean. If you've ever tried to read the Bible cover to cover, this is the place you end up stopping and getting bored, is all these crazy rules about purity that don't make sense to our culture. Thou shalt not wear clothes with two fabrics. I don't know what that's about, but most of us probably have clothes with some cotton, some polyester. That's about purity. Thou shalt not eat shrimp and eagles and rock badgers. Does anyone know what a rock badger is? I'm guessing it's like a marmot. I don't know. But it's unclean, and you won't fit in right if you eat one of those things. If you touch the skin of a pig, you have to wash it in just the right way in order to become ritually clean so you can see God again. They loved purity in the Old Testament, not mixing things that didn't belong together. And it wasn't so long in our culture. Many of you remember distinctly when if thou were white, thou shalt not marry someone who is brown. Some of you remember those days. And most of you believe today some animals, maybe shrimp are for eating, but eagles aren't. Yeah, there's some animals we eat and some animals we pet and we take pictures of. There's some divide there that's just kind of in us. I don't know what that's about. There's a great book about that recently. And I've met plenty of people who tell me that I mix my clothes in really unfashionable ways. I don't know what that is, but there it is. So there's purity on one hand. And on the other hand, there's another theme that runs all through the Hebrews Bible that celebrates people like Ruth. His translation said Moabitess, which is hard to say. Moabite. She's a woman from a country called Moab, which is, it's not really a country, it's a region, it's away. There was a war there 30 years between some of the southern Israeli people and this group of people. They're not from the same tribe, they're not really the same people, so there's tension in that. And you notice through the story, her name is always Ruth the Moabite, or Ruth from Moab. It's always kind of connected in that. And the Old Testament is so clear over and over that God says you must treat outsiders with respect and hospitality. And it gives a long list of rules about how to do that. For all the awkward stories out there about, I'm going to smite these people, I'm going to smite these people, and you should take over their land. For all those stories, the Hebrew Bible consistently shines God's love on widows, orphans, and foreigners. Ruth is a foreigner who lost her husband. And last week we talked about how maybe her name is a clue about being an orphan, about how maybe she didn't have a family. Her name, does anyone remember her name was the other one, the extra one? And so maybe she was, as a child, given up as an orphan. Ruth is a stranger who does not fit in the land near Bethlehem. And everyone knows those people from Moab and how dirty they are, and she is a woman, for pity's sake. Not only is she of little value as a person, but just as importantly, she's just different. She doesn't belong here. And yet in steps Boaz, whose name means a little bit strength, and he offers compassion. He's strong enough himself in knowing who he is to offer more than compassion. He could have followed the biblical and the laws of the day and let her glean the leftovers of the field, but more than that, he welcomes her personally, talks to her eye to eye. He listens to her story. He appreciates the struggle that she has gone through. Then he tells others how to treat her, and he breaks so many cultural boundaries by treating her almost like she matters. And why is that? What, is he just impressed? There's part of the text that seems like he's just impressed with the kind of individual she is, so he's going to reward her. Maybe. Did he see her as marriageable material? I mean, he says, who's that young woman over there? And you can put that in your own voice. Maybe he just said, who's that young woman over there? He could have said, who's that young woman over there? Whatever it is, maybe that's what he's getting at. Or maybe Boaz is just nicer than most people. We don't know. Last week, we got into the names of all the people in the story, what they meant. Remember what Naomi means? Oh, it's more awkward for you than it is for me. Her name means pleasant or sweet. And then Elimelech is God is king. And Ruth is just the extra one. So let's peel this back to a little secret in Hebrew, another linguistic kind of secret in this text, actually about the word Hebrew. An Israelite is someone who lives in... Yeah, you got that one. That was pretty easy. Yeah. The land of Israel got its name somewhere near the time of this, where this story takes place. It used to be, little tribes, and when those tribes come together, it's called Israel. And then the word Jew means someone, most technically, someone who practices the Jewish religion, which is a religion that grew out of a region called Judah. And Judah had been called Judah for a long, long, long time. It's one of the 12 tribes. It was the biggest part of the southern tribes of Israel there. But the distinction of having a Judah-ish religion, that was a little bit later, after Ruth. So this is kind of somewhat a newer word. But the word Hebrew, that goes back a long way. Back to the Egyptians, maybe back even before that. They might have stole it from Sumerians, who pretty much invented language. And nowadays we think of Hebrews as just designating a people, maybe even an ethnic tribe some of us have in our mind. That's not what the word means at all. The word where it came from in Egyptian is apiru, A-P-I-R-U, apiru. And it described the sort of people today we might call gypsies, or nomads, or wanderers, or homeless. Homeless by choice. Ancient Hebrews were, by definition, by what the word meant, they were strangers, outsiders, foreigners. They were just the different people that filtered through that whole region. They didn't belong anywhere. They didn't have land. And it's no surprise why the Egyptians would enslave some of them. It's a lot easier to go grab the leftovers than it is to go and conquer some far country and hike everyone back. And so when eventually the Apiru are settled, they have their own language, they're Hebrew. First priority, hey, let's care for everyone now who is like we used to be. Because God helped us when we were in this situation. And now when we see anyone who's struggling and lost and a foreigner, we want to care for them. And so when we get to Ruth, she is this perfect glimpse of this vision of what it is to be a Hebrew. And Boaz, he seems to see something in Ruth that echoes the story of his people. She's been through so much, and she deserves some extended grace. He identifies with her and her story, and she might as well be a Hebrew. It's almost like the story is a reminder for all Jewish people and for all of us that we are Ruth. We are Apiru. Because at some point in all of our lives, literally sometimes, figuratively many of the times, we are all different. We are all lost at times. We are all wandering in places we don't belong. We all at times feel like we are in a place that we do not belong. Whether it's middle school, which is pretty awful on all of us, hardest time of life. Whether it's when we're getting done with a divorce, or when a boss or someone has power over us to judge us. Maybe someone in our life, our anchor that seems to define who we are, when that person passes away or leaves, we are lost. And we can identify with Ruth. We are hungry. We are abused. We are sick. We are strangers. We are apiru. And that is the feeling that's been going around this week. Maybe about 10 days. Because Sue prayed for it last week. As so many people held up signs in Paris and around the world that said, Je suis Charlie. Or maybe they held up other signs for the Muslim French policeman who died in that whole business. And those signs said, Je suis Ahmed. See, those people, that person who suffered in ways that wasn't right. And I feel like that person. I am that person. We are those people. We are the oppressed. We are the hurting. We are the ones. We are the ones who are praying together. The way Martin Luther King, birthday a couple days ago, celebrated tomorrow, he understood it this way. He said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Paul, in the Bible, he wrote a whole bunch of the New Testament. He said it this way, if one part suffers, all parts suffer with it. And those saints knew that we are all in this together. Moabite, Egyptian, Hebrew, American, the whole globe. When it comes to the way that we treat each other, it doesn't matter white or black or brown or all the shades that surround that. When it comes to how we see God in the face of our neighbor, man, woman, all the complicated sexual identities that weave between, we are all children of God. When it comes to valuing each other in this world, it doesn't matter whether we are a farmer or a worker or gleaning and homeless. I choose to be Christian, but that's a label about me, not a standard division of contention between Jews and pagans and Muslims and Hindi or whatever. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. If one part suffers, all parts suffer with it. Ruth, it says in the text, only a foreigner, but may the Lord protect her. Je suis Charlie. Je suis Ahmed. We are Ruth. We are Hebrew. We are all of us in God's care and called to care for each other. May it be so.